Excellent job. Team, welcome to Path to the Pros. Here we are, 6 p.m., or actually 6:13 Mountain Time, and you could be anywhere you could possibly be on a Thursday night, but you chose to be with us, and we really do appreciate that. Path to the Pros is brought to you by Bluechip. That's Aaron and myself, where we build the human being underneath the athlete. I'm Thomas Rose, sports performance coach and co-founder of Blueprint to Bluechip, and with me always is my co-founder and CEO, Aaron Sarles. 25 years of Fortune 500 executive coaching, sports mom, that's important, and the woman who built the Blueprint Caddy framework. Tonight, we're talking about something that doesn't get enough airtime on shows like this one. We're talking about Path to the Pros, the draft, the contract, the moment you've been working your whole life towards, and then the transition out of sports. But nobody talks about what happens the second after that moment ends. The money hits, the opportunities come, the people show up, and most athletes, most families have no idea what to do next. Tonight's guest lived that firsthand. He played professionally in the MLB. He learned what nobody taught him, and then he built an entire platform so the next generation doesn't have to figure it out along the way. So welcome to the Path to the Pros, and tonight in the room with us, former professional athlete who took everything the game taught him about discipline, leadership, and resilience and channeled it into one of the most important missions in sports today. He's a certified financial educator instructor, CFEI. He is FINRA registered with the Securities Industry Essentials, Series 7 and Series 63. He's a senior team leader of Fidelity Investments, and he is the founder of the Players Equity, which we're going to get into deep tonight. A financial education platform built specifically for athletes and athletic families who deserve to know what nobody else has taught them about money. A man who played the game and then decided to change it. Cam Satterwhite, welcome to Path to the Pros. We're super excited to have you with us.
Thomas, I appreciate it. The warm intro, it makes me feel flattered, but makes me feel much, much bigger. So I appreciate that. Definitely. Thank you and glad to be a part.
Man, you earned it. You earned it. And what I mean by that is we're going to get into it. But first, Cam, take us back. Where did you grow up and when did athletics become serious for you?
Good question. I grew up here in Cincinnati, Ohio, born and raised, still here. I think for me, I started off playing t-ball and, like most kids do, had fun with it, just really having fun with the game. I think that was like the most important part for me. My parents allowed me to enjoy it. Ironically, I ultimately got a chance to play pro ball, but I was the kid playing it in the dirt.
Okay.
I was the kid, making sandcastles during the inning and doing all the stuff, right? Just playing in the dirt, but having fun on the ball field. And, it wasn't something that I really wanted to do at the moment. Just wanted to kind of have fun. And so I took the desire to have fun and kind of over the years just turned it into, I actually might be kind of good at this. And so as I continue to move forward, play in different spaces, I just learned that, this is fun, but I'm also kind of good at it.
Right.
And so everywhere I went, just playing, competing, realizing that I was always amongst some of the top and cream of the crop, I guess, if you will. And so, just traveling, going to different states, playing against top prospects and, being able to compete with them and then creating friendships. All started from a kid who was making sandcastles in the infield at a young age. And so, it was a game that was fun for me, but it turned into something more than that. And so, I credit my parents a lot for allowing me to just have fun. And in the process of having fun, the baseball bug bit me, kept playing, and ended up getting a chance to play pro ball. So it was a good time.
No doubt. So walk us through your playing career. Clearly, you probably played Little League. Then you went into some club ball and then high school. And then at what point during high school did you realize, you know what, I'm going to do this for a living?
You know what? I think I was so my freshman year in high school. I was one of those kids that was enamored by a guy by the name of Ken Griffey Jr. And I was like, man, this dude is pretty good. And he's from here and he went to Moeller High School. And so I'm going to Moeller. And so I went, and I think my freshman year, coming out, I knew I was good. But again, it was fun. And so, I met the coaches during the open house. Moeller's a private school. So I met the coaching staff all across the board, freshman to varsity. And in talking to them, I remember kind of like, well, they said to me, I asked the question. I said, "Do freshmen play varsity here?" And I think every coach laughed. And so I was like, "All right, there's the challenge."
There you
And
go.
so for me, that was a challenge I put on myself. I wore it on my shoulders very proudly. And my freshman year, went out. I hit 609 as a freshman. And it was a good time. But again, like I realized that I could play. And, I took the challenge of everybody laughing, like, okay, I'll show you.
Right.
And then ended up playing 3 years of varsity. Never looked back, never came out. Had a great career. Actually, just had my career RBI record broken this year, to a young kid named Connor Cuzzo, and he is phenomenal. But to hold a record for 20 years from a kid that had very little expectation, from others, I would say, to walk into that was something that I really enjoyed. So it taught me early on to really bet against myself or bet for myself, have confidence in myself, and really just go after what it is I think I can accomplish.
That's remarkable. That is truly incredible. All right, so high school ends. Walk us through. So, did you choose to go into the draft and go straight into double A, triple A, or did you go off to college, and where did you go?
Man, I wish. So, high school ended. I first went to, well, I was drafted at the time by the Cleveland Indians. And I remember like the draft came, I was picked and stuff came in the mail. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like, what do I do? Now I'm a professional and not realizing like there's more to it. And so this is a business. So, the next day my contracts came over and I had to sign stuff for my name, image, and likeness, which kids are now getting paid for. But I had to sign that. And so I signed the paperwork and I was like, okay, cool. My name showed up everywhere. But I ultimately ended up going to Indiana University.
Okay.
And so I had a scholarship to play ball, and it was cool. I was the first athlete from my family to be able to go to college and play based off of my athletic ability. And so went to Indiana, had a good time there. Ended up transferring back home to University of Cincinnati, where I got a chance to play with my good friend Josh Harrison, who played in the big leagues, and some other guys, Tony Campana, so on and so forth. But a bunch of guys. We had a great team. We played well. And then, from there, had a couple good seasons, few good seasons, and then actually went undrafted, but signed with the Frontier League. So did well there my first year. And I think at that time, I realized like, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yep.
There's alternate routes. And so ultimately, what is it that I want to do? And so, playing in what, Evansville, Indiana, which most people don't know about. Like it's a small city, but it was a good time. I was playing pro ball. I remember getting my first check, sending the picture back to my parents. It was for $205 after taxes. So I was like, I can get gas. I got a check. I'm getting paid to play baseball. So it was great. But then, signing with the Reds from there, did great while I was in Evansville, signed with the Reds, and then got a chance to play in the Reds organization. So, I don't know if it was like a decision per se, where I was like, I'm going to do this. It was more like, I just want to keep playing and I enjoy the game. I want to be a part of it. I'm having fun and I'm good at it. So,
Right.
it was more of that.
I love it. This is a two-part question. You play it since you're such a young man playing baseball, basically a kid's game, and then you get an opportunity to go into a major league clubhouse. It's almost like you got to be careful what you wish for. Walk us through that, walking through the Reds, and you're like, here I am. I made it to the league. I made it to the show.
Oh man, that was, I think that I was really intimidated. And I'll say that because I ironically I was talking to a guy today about this, but seeing names that you, especially being in Cincinnati, seeing names and knowing people that you have only watched on television. So, I got a chance to interact with Brandon Phillips.
Wow.
Great friend, great guy. But it was overwhelming. I was like, wow, that's Brandon Phillips.
Right.
So that was cool. Billy Hamilton was drafted that year. And so we were roommates in spring training. So, seeing a guy that could run like that, a guy that was cool, he was down to earth. But I'm like, dude, you're Billy Hamilton. And he was like, come on, man. We're just on the same team. We're cool. And so he ended up actually helping me pick my wife's engagement ring. So, he and I were good friends. Seeing just so many different guys. I think for me, I very quickly started to question my own ability. Like, am I in the right place? Like, do I have imposter syndrome at this point? Like, what am I doing here? And so, I think with that, um, it was one of those things where it was just like, okay, I'm here. And baseball is something I've done my whole life. And so
Right.
let me just go and do what I do. And so went out, played against, some great pitchers, some great players. But I was one of those guys. I was one of the great players and I was able to compete, had a great time. And every year guys are coming in from the draft who are, one year I was playing at Dayton. Ryan Lamar comes from Michigan. He was our second round pick. He comes straight to Dayton, and he and I became friends, right? We're
Love it.
not competing, we're friends. And so, I was like, dude, I know a lot about you, but I don't really know you. And
Right.
so, being able to have that friendship, but also realize that we're peers now, and I can compete the same way he can, regardless as to what the signing bonuses say or what the expectation is. I think that was something that really helped me out and really helped to like calm my nerves, but also make me realize that I'm in the right place and I deserve to be there.
No doubt. Cam, you touched on something that I want to dig into because we've had other athletes on the show, Super Bowl champions, World Series winners, first round draft picks and NFL and NBA. And I asked them about as a fan, when you see these athletes in the dugout or on the sideline or in a Super Bowl, every one of them at some point has had the imposter syndrome. Walk us through that, where it set in for you. What did it feel like, and how did you shake it off?
So I think for me, it really set in when I first went to spring training.
Mm,
And, I think, what happened, I flew into Arizona and, they came to pick me up in the Reds van. And the guy that was sitting in the front seat was Dave Chappelle, who ended up playing in the big leagues. And
sure.
so, I didn't know much about Dave at the time, but I was like, who is this little guy sitting in the front seat? And, what's going on here? And, he was such a good guy. Like he was really down to earth, and maybe it was because we were all playing, but he was just so down to earth, and he was a good friend for me, somebody I talked to, and so I think the more and more we talked, the more I realized, like, okay, this is just baseball. Um, I can like kind of relax a little bit and just kind of cool my jets. When we got to the hotel, I started seeing, Juan Duran, a guy who signed for $2 million, and like, all these different guys, all them, Aroldis Chapman signed that year, right? And so you're seeing these guys and you're like, wait a minute, I now regress. I don't belong here. But but very quickly I was like, okay, like we're just playing baseball. And despite how much money a guy might have signed for, he's going to throw a fastball, he's going to field a ground ball, he's going to catch a fly ball, and he's swinging a similar wood bat to myself. So we're just playing baseball. And I think after, I would say, maybe the first day of spring training, I think that's when it started to wear off.
Good.
And I realized like very quickly I deserved to be there. I was there for a reason. And I had a purpose. And then I could change my mindset to the goals I was trying to accomplish, what it was that was important to me, setting the goals for the season, spring training, and so on and so forth. So it took a little while, but it was worth it. We got there quick, and when we did, everything else was history.
I love it. So did you have a welcome to MLB moment where you're at the plate and you're like, okay, these pitches have some giddy up, or maybe you were in the outfield? What was your MLB welcome to the MLB moment?
So I think my first welcome was probably. I don't. So I'll say. So it was this. So I'm playing in Dayton for the Dayton Dragons at the time, and I got moved up. A guy got hurt, and so I get called up, and I'm like, okay, it was a couple pieces to that, some moving parts. I planned a proposal to my girlfriend at the time, and she was in the air flying to Arizona. And so I'm like, how do I handle this? I'm so excited. I put it on Facebook at the time, and I'm like, headed up to Dayton. I'm on my way. I'm really looking forward to it. She goes from Cincinnati to Atlanta, lands in Atlanta, turns her phone on, and sees I get moved up, and she calls me. She's like, "You got moved up?" I was like, yeah. I was like, just fly down, we'll fly back together. So we go through all of that. I propose. She says yes. We're still married, so it was good. But I think, the first night I get moved up, I'm going to play. I think it's like 15,000 fans in the seats. And, leadoff batter is left handed. I'm in left field. And he's, kind of late on the fastball. Sure enough, hits a ball to me. I would say it's fairly routine, but not with 15,000 fans when you haven't played in front of that many people. And so immediately, as soon as the ball's hit, I froze. I was like, "Ugh," and I fielded it on a hop. The whole stadium booed me. Like
Oh,
everybody was booing, and I was like, all right, I'm here now. I'm here.
yeah.
So it didn't last long. I went up. I was hitting, I think, third or fourth. Got a base hit, and everything was great after that. So ended up doing really well in A ball in Dayton. So it was a good time, very quick turnaround, and I'm glad it turned around quickly.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, that's an awesome story, both about your girlfriend now, which became your wife, and then freezing at that moment when it's time to step up. So you had a fantastic career, long career, but like most athletes, they don't ever think about the day that it ends. Walk us through that mindset when you said, "All right, you're going to talk to your agent, you're going to talk to your wife, not in that order, and you're going to talk to your family and say, all right, it's time to make that transition." What was it that kind of finally, what was that moment, that light bulb moment, and what was your next step after that?
So I would say my story was slightly different. I signed as a free agent, and so I think coming in that way, I realized that in pro sports, there are certain things that allow you to get more latitude, and typically that's signing bonus, investment, so on and so forth. And so, because I didn't have substantial investment, I was not the same level of priority as other guys. And so, I got released. I was leading, the whole organization in offensive numbers, home runs, RBIs, doubles, everything. And what I was told when I got released was, hey, we have other guys we gave more money to. We got to let these guys get one more shot.
Yeah,
And so I think for me, that immediately helped me understand that this is a business. This is not about anything else. And so, to be very honest, it took me a long time to really digest that. I think I went through, I would say now that I'm older and, wiser, I like to think, I went through a depression, and it was difficult. Especially when you grow up believing that if I perform, I'm going to get opportunities. And it didn't work out that way. And
right.
so, for me, I think it took me a lot longer than I would say. Maybe it took a guy, my buddy Josh Harrison, 13 years. He retires, he goes and he's driving his girls around. All right, I'm dad now. But for me, the decision was made for me to take the cleats off. And
Yeah,
so that was something that I never thought was going to happen. And so it put me in a spot where I was like, okay, now what? And, I think a lot of guys, especially other guys that I know, there's a very small number. Like it's a small number that make it to pro sports, but it's even smaller that actually make it. I
correct.
was just at an event yesterday at University of Cincinnati for the Next Now conference, and they had a representative from the NFL there, and he was saying, most of you guys are not even going to make it 2 years, right?
Yep.
And so, understanding that, you got to think about what's next. And so I think, for me during this journey, I didn't think about what was next, and so it cost me. It took me a long time to really figure out what was going to be next for me, what was right for me, how I was going to continue through life and be successful, and what success looked like.
Right.
And so it was a tough task. But I would say if I had to put a timeline on it, I would say maybe probably took me 6 7 years.
Sure.
Took a long time, but I look back now, and it's part of my push to really help athletes understand what it is that they want to do
Yep.
and what it is that they can do. And I love, kind of outside of our question, but I love the NIL because I think it not only will pay the athletes for what they're giving, but it also allows them to set that foundation in the event that they are like me and don't make it to the big leagues or don't make it for the 20-year career. They have a base or a foundation where they can actually continue to move forward with their life. So
100%.
yeah, I just that's kind of my story. It was a tough road. But I'm glad I went through it. Definitely earned my stripes, no question, and we got to a better place.
No question, no question. And that's what these young athletes and these families need to hear, because a lot of them think that they're going to have that Derek Jeter or Tom Brady career, right? And we know how small it is. These athletes are so fortunate. Now they worked for it to get to that next level, whether it's, college ball, or whether it's, just some say a cup of coffee with the NFL. And when did you realize the financial piece of your athletic journey was broken, and where did the players' equity come from?
So I think I realized the financial piece was broken. I would say sometime early, right? I
Right.
didn't have a huge signing bonus. It was good enough for me to buy my now wife an engagement ring. And so what I realized is playing baseball was more than just the financial side. There's more things that I have to do. And so even when I was released, came home and my wife and we were expecting our first child. And so I was like, all right, well, our child deserves better. Like she can't sit here and sulk the same way that I can. And so
Right.
I had to go to work. And so, for me, I think that kind of spiked the financial side to help me understand, like, hey, listen, there's more to this than what you're sitting in. And then I think looking at athletes today, NIL, rev share, so on and so forth, they're making money, but my fear and my question is constantly like, okay, within 5 years of retirement, 72% of athletes are going to file for bankruptcy.
Yep.
So, what are we doing to circumvent that? What are we doing to help with that? And the bigger question I ask is now, what happens now that athletes are making this type of money? What are we going to do with the athletes that don't make it to the epitome of their league, right? The NFL, the NBA, the MLB, right? What's going to happen there? They made seven figures in college through NIL rev share, but good luck trying to help them tap into a 35,000, 45,000, $50,000 job
Yep.
after making seven figures. And
Yep.
so, for me, I just realized very quickly that if we can't, there's certain voices that matter in a room. The voices that have been there are always going to matter more than the voices that have never been there,
That's
because
right.
when you're an athlete, everybody wants to work with you, right? Like I can think about people that wanted to represent me as an agent, as an advisor, so on and so forth. Everybody wants to work with that person because they want to make money.
Sure.
But the voices that matter the most are the voices that have been there. And if you're not one of those voices, you got to do a lot more work to try to get yourself there. And those of us that have the voice, we need to do a better job of reaching back and making sure that we share the knowledge, share the information, especially from a financial standpoint, because a lot of times you have athletes that they've never engaged in this type of income ever.
So true. So true. Aaron, did you want to jump in?
I would love to. Of course, I want to jump in. I come at it from a parent's angle, and I get this question asked a lot. When is the right time for these parents and athletes to start having the financial conversation? Because we obviously know it's an important one, and I think in a lot of examples, it's not happening early enough, or it's not happening at all.
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't think there's any time that's too early. Um, one example I always think about is, you know, parents that give some sort of money to their kids, right? Their kids are earning it, whatever. Like, make them put some of that money away. If you're paying your kid $20 to cut the grass, make them put away, $10. And if they want something, save the other 10 over time so they can get what they want. What happens there is it's kind of like, I'll steal a book line from the book Atomic Habits, which is habit stacking, right? And if you build those habits, then it's easier to take them with you when the big money comes. If I put away 50% of my income or 20%, 30%, whatever it is, if I've done that while I don't have that much, then when I have a lot more, it's natural because I've done it for years, which will set them up for success long term, and make things better for them, which they may not realize it in the moment, but it makes things better in the long term.
No doubt. No doubt. Tell us about the players' equity. What is it, and who is it for?
So the players' equity, actually, believe it or not, Thomas, we've gone through a couple evolutions, but today the players' equity is really about teaching athletes and families, but specifically athletes. I'll tell you the latest pivot I've made is I'm actually looking to partner with universities, colleges to help them really give education to their student athletes.
Perfect.
I love the high school piece of it. I selfishly want to go back to my alma mater. I've had a question that came out there to say, would you entertain something here? And I'm for them, absolutely. But I
Sure.
would look at doing high schools as well. I think the information is key. The conversations are key, and I think getting the right people in the right rooms to have these conversations is really what's most important.
No question. So build on that. You built a community specifically for athletes. Why is community so important for this conversation?
I really believe that community is key because it takes a village, right? It
Yeah.
takes a village. And, you can hear something from me and they're like, all right, that's one person's opinion. But, if you hear it from 5 people, from 10 people, or from voices that you trust, people who have been there before, then I think it speaks a little bit more loudly. People pay attention more. People are impacted more. There's more of a change because ultimately everybody wants to be successful. They want to be happy. But, I think one of the things I've noticed is athletes, guys who have been there, they really want to give back. They
Right.
want to share this information. They want to reach one, teach one to the next generation. And so, gathering people together, having these conversations is really what is the most important piece of that, to be able to make the influence that you want to make.
For sure. And what should high school athletes be doing financially right now, even before the scholarship or the contract?
I think the biggest thing right now is educate yourself.
Sure.
I'd say that kind of tongue in cheek because here in Ohio, high school athletes can make NIL dollars. And
Right.
so, there's some places where they cannot, but a lot of places they can. And so, there's high school athletes here in Ohio making 7 figures. And
Crazy.
so, you think about it, you're like, that's great for them. But like, odds are their family has never had that type of money. Odds are, do they have the right team around them so they're actually prepared and safe in that space? And so, I think the most important part you can do right now is educate yourself, learn, ask questions. There's no question. Well, let me back up. We say this to kids all the time, but I think as we grow older, we forget this. There's no such thing as a dumb question except for the question that's never asked.
Sure.
Right. And so, there are adults who don't know what to do in certain situations. They've never had a kid who makes more money than they do. And if that's you
Right.
or if that's somebody in the audience, ask the question. Right. Don't feel
Right.
bad about it. You need to get answers because you need the resources, the information to really protect yourself moving forward.
For sure. For sure. Before we went on before we went live here, we were talking about our dads, and I remember my dad. I said to my dad, I said, "Dad, there's no such thing as a dumb question." He goes, "That's true, Thomas, but there are some stupid ones." And I was like, "All right, thanks, Dad." But it's true. There are no dumb or stupid questions, especially when it comes to your future, or especially when it comes to finances, because there is no player book, right? We talk about going to MLB, we talking about NFL. There's a player's book, but the financial path is something that, and you talked about it. There's so many of these athletes within 2, 3, 5 years, they go bankrupt after their playing career. What does an athlete or family need to know about when it comes to trust with financial guidance?
That's a good question. So I think the big thing is me personally, having spent time in financial services, if you're going to get a financial advisor, my preference, and I think personally, I think every athlete should target this, is a CFP financial advisor.
Okay.
And I say that because CFPs operate off of a different standard. A standard financial advisor, he may do all the right things. So let me not make them seem bad, right?
Right.
But excuse me, a standard financial advisor operates off of a suitability standard. Suitability means I have to recommend investments or different things that are suitable to what your requirements are and what you need and per your investment profile.
Awesome.
CFPs operate off of fiduciary, which means I have to do what's best for you before I can do what's best for me. And so, in that regard, you think about it and you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't matter how much commission you're going to make. It doesn't matter what you think about the investment. You have to do what's best for your clients first. And
Right.
so, there's a lot of athletes that don't know that. I've had conversations with some athletes and I'm like, do you work with a CFP? And they were like, "What does that mean?" And walking them through that. Um, I thought about getting my CFP specifically so I could offer that to any clients that I will work with. I personally feel like it's that important, and I feel like with an athlete, it just makes it that much more important. I have a friend who's a CFP financial advisor, and I think because of our relationship and our connection, I've realized that's not the route that I have to go. I would rather put him in the room and have him connect with people who need that. And so, I very proudly will connect them on everything that I do. I can, meet with them. We sit and have coffee or, croissant sandwiches. We do whatever. But I think he's the right guy. And personally, I really believe that the CFPs, they're held to a different standard.
Sure.
And as an athlete, you're talking less than 1% of the population are really going to get there. And so why not work with the CFP?
Awesome. Awesome. Aaron, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think, in this day and age, there's so much information out there, and or we'd call misinformation, maybe lies, however you want to frame that up. How do families and athletes start to really weed through, or what's your advice of finding the right people to surround themselves with so that they're not being taken advantage of?
Yeah, so personally, I think you have to be okay with asking questions. I think we can oftentimes take things at face value. So if somebody says, "Oh, I'm," especially in the NIL space, right? I think that space concerns me the most, only because you can stand yourself up today and say, I do NIL and I work with anybody with NIL, and we're going to do that. There's not many parameters around it. And so, for me, I really believe that certifications are key, but I also believe asking the right questions are key. Ask your peers. Odds are somebody's been in the space before. Somebody can help you, right? I think, what I've also learned in the sports industry is we it's a buddy system. So, odds are you may sign with somebody because your buddy is with them. That's not always a bad thing. Maybe ask your buddy how they got to that point.
Right.
When you're shopping around, look for people who have a strong portfolio. And I say this, and it's tough to get started. I will say that I think for anybody, but find somebody that's got a portfolio. Don't be their verse. You know what I mean? Like, don't go into it and say, you know what? I'm looking for a financial advisor or somebody that can help me with my NIL. I'm going to be, Joe's client. I'm going to be your first client. Well, Joe may not know the ropes. You might
Right.
not want to go with Joe because there's things that he is unaware of, and he's going to learn through the process, but he's going to learn with your money as you give him or trust him or have him in this space to do and make all these decisions for you. So I think, having the track record, talking to your peers, I think is important. Certifications are important. Again, CFP, I always will lean back on that in terms of the financial obligations and the financial management. If you have it, you can kind of stand on a different leg. In the financial space specifically, I'll share you can go to a website www.brokercheck.com and you can
Bingo.
type in any financial advisor to find out if they have any dings, if they've done anything, or if they're great, right? You can see all their certifications, if they're still active and practicing, all of the different things. So there's a couple different things out there, but depending on what lane you're in, definitely educate yourself as best you can.
That's awesome. What's the one thing every athlete should do in the first 30 days after signing their first professional contract? And before you get into that, how is the contract different from a pro contract to a contract with an NIL deal in college?
Hmm. Good question. So I'll start with the first part. I think the first thing they should do is find somebody that can give them sound advice.
Okay.
I think too often I'm seeing athletes take the money and the first thing they want to do is go buy a car,
Right.
buy a house for mom and dad, go and spend it on, a non-appreciating asset or something that's not going to help them or something they don't really understand. So feel confident putting money away and just sitting and waiting. I personally like, if you don't know, you don't want to invest, you don't want to go to the stock market, you don't want to do all that, that's cool. There's a thing called a high yield savings account you can look into. There is no brick and mortar for those, but they give you a better interest rate on return than a brick and mortar bank. So maybe you
Sure.
want to go to a high yield. That's one thing. So, different places, but definitely feel confident sitting on it and doing nothing. In terms of the difference between a pro contract and an NIL contract, what I'm understanding and what I know is that the NIL contracts are everybody that gets them, they're 1099 independent contractors.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest difference. And what that means is you are now responsible for your own taxes. So, it might not sound like a big deal, but if you get $1 million deal and you're responsible for your own taxes, you better make sure you take care of that, or else
Yes.
Uncle Sam is coming after you. And
Right.
so a lot of these kids don't understand what that means, right? Like you get $1 million, but it's not really a million. There's
Right.
money you need to put away because you're going to need to pay the taxes on it, period.
Right.
So you want to make sure you are prepared for that. Don't spend $1 million is not $1 million. So, you don't want to spend $1 million and like, oh yeah, I'm living large. Well, you missed about what, 400,000 or 500,000 in taxes.
Right.
And you owe that regardless. So like you're gonna have to make sure you take care of those things. So just go into it with your eyes wide open.
You're so right on that one. And that leads to the next question. What's the biggest financial myth in sports that needs to be debunked right now? I mean, taxes is definitely one of them.
Yes, I think taxes big time. I think, you know, I see I've always seen, and I think we don't none of us have to really look far, but athletes get in trouble with taxes so often. I
Yeah.
mean, so often, and you know it's kind of that unspoken thing. Like, is the agent doing it? Is the financial advisor doing it? At the end of the day, the athlete is responsible. So, who's on your team? Who's helping you? Who's protecting you? So, if you're going to entrust somebody with your funds, make sure they have your best interests at mind, right? Top of mind. make sure that they're looking out for you across the board. Taxes, making sure you're putting savings away, right? You don't want to spend a zero, have nothing, and then, oh, by the way, you either owe taxes, so now you have nothing, and you got to figure out what you're going to do in the long term, or something like that, right? You just want to make sure that you have someone who actually has you prepared, and taxes are a big, big, big part of that.
Yep. Yep. And for the parent whose kid just signed their first NIL deal, what do you tell them to do tomorrow morning? I mean, we talked about, like, one of the things we've heard of, do you set up an LLC? Do you set up an S Corp? Because you are a 1099 and you're going to have to start protecting that money right away.
Yeah. So I did a lot of work with college student athletes, and I remember the first time that I heard a kid tell me, I set up an LLC, and I was like, "That's super smart."
Yep.
I love that, and so that would be my suggestion as well. I think you really want to separate yourself there, protect yourself in the process. It's easy to do, and I think if you have NIL money, you have a lot that you're working with. The cost for an LLC is very minimal at best, so I think it's worth it. It's worth the time, it's worth the legwork to really just separate yourself from the income so you don't have any issues in the long run.
Awesome. Awesome. Aaron, jump in.
Sorry, I gotta unmute myself. No, I think for a lot of athletes, I think they think they're going to come into generational wealth. And I think people don't really understand what that means, because I don't think that happens for most people. How would you describe that? I mean, how does that even fit into this conversation? Because what does that look like compared to, I think, what most professional athletes and or even NIL deals are getting?
Yeah. So to me, I think generational wealth is very relative. I think, you can hear $1 million, and it sounds like, oh, I never had to work a day of my life. But what are you gonna do with that money?
Right.
Right? If you go out, you go buy a Lamborghini Urus and you spend $300,000 after taxes, you may have what, $200,000 left, $100,000 left. So I think it's really setting yourself up for the long haul, whatever it is, right? Believe it or not, I know this is, some athletes may not ever think about this, but a Honda Accord can do the same thing that a Lamborghini Urus can do. Believe it or not, I know it's shocking, but you can do things in moderation, right? You don't have to go all the way to the apex of whatever is out there just because you looked at it your whole life. All right, so I think that's a big part of it. Just putting money away, like, be okay with putting money to the side. I've heard a lot of athletes, I'll leave them unnamed, but a lot of athletes they live solely off endorsement money,
Right.
and they put contract money away, right? And so, that's generational wealth when you can do something like that. If you're putting money away or investing it or doing something that actually grows your income or grows your money on the side while you're still living your life and doing your thing. If it was me, and it's easy to say when you're 39 years old and you've worked in financial services and you've done all these things. One thing tangible that I would do if I was a college kid today, and I would say this backing into even knowing what I know, the very first thing I would do beyond saving is I would go buy some property right on campus. I would make an investment, and if it's the place I live in, I would buy it, and I would live there, and I would charge rent to my friends, and I would say, "All right, guys, you can live here for $100, $200, whatever." That way, they can help me pay the mortgage.
Right.
I have a place to live, and then I would just sit on the rest of the money. And I'll
Yep.
say, well, I don't know what I need to do, but I have money if I want to do something. So if I want to go to McDonald's tomorrow, I can go to McDonald's and I don't have to worry about it. If I want to go on vacation, I can go on vacation and not have to worry about it. And then, by the way, oh, it just so happens that I get drafted, I go to the league. I can take that now into turn it into an appreciating asset where I can say, all right, now I own this place. I'm going to rent it out. And anybody that's on campus that needs a place to live, you can come stay at my place. And that's how I would do it. Just thinking through some of the things that are out there, some of the things my parents have said, and things that I've been taught. Like that's how I would do it.
Awesome. Awesome. Cam, we could go on for another hour talking about the finances because, it never ceases to amaze us when Aaron and I deal with athletes and families that, they just, it's almost like they're intimidated to ask the difficult questions. And, somebody that in your position, we ask every single guest in Paths to the Pros the same final question. You played the game, you learned the hard lessons, and then you built something so the next generation doesn't have to. What do you want your name or legacy to stand for?
That's a good question. So the most important thing to me is to always be a conduit of help.
Yeah.
And so, I really want people to remember me as somebody who was honest, transparent, and always wanting the best for everyone, right? The people that come in contact with me, I don't want anything from anybody. And so, if people can always see me as somebody that wants the best, excuse me, that really sums up what's important to me. And it's something that, again, I want to be remembered for. I would love to have that on my headstone, when it's all said and done, is, this is a guy that cared about people.
Yeah.
And so, that's the most important thing to me. I've been into a lot of places. I've done a lot of great things. I've, enjoyed everything I've done. But, the fact that for me, knowing that whenever my time comes and I can leave here, it's that I've really poured into others and helped others. That's all I need. That makes me feel whole, and that makes me feel like I won.
I love it. It's very similar to one of the two things that Aaron and I share with the families and athletes is one, we want you to get enough information to make an informed decision, and two, always be proactive, not reactive. Right? That's a tough place to be. Cam, where can people get a hold of you? Whether it's a website, your social media, or an email.
So I see my social media handle is on there. So that's awesome. Cam Twice, Cam Twice. I'll share with you Vincent Twice from back in the day is kind of the name sake there. So Cam Twice on LinkedIn, or I'm sorry, Instagram, Cam Satterwhite on LinkedIn. Let's see, theplayersequity.com is my website. Feel free to jump on. I am looking actively to do roundtables at universities, high schools, people that are interested. I have professional athletes and professionals who are looking to join those conversations, and so I am available. But I'm here to help. So anybody has interest, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. That's so true. And we know that that's genuine. Cam, thank you for being honest, for being real, and for giving our athletes and families something they can act on tonight. The players' equity exists because of the conviction that athletes deserve better, and we are grateful that you shared it with our audience tonight. And to everyone watching, share this. Tag an athlete, tag a sports parent, tag a coach. This conversation is too important to keep to yourself, and Cam just shared just decades of wisdom. And you can find Cam at the Players Equity. Get into that community. This is exactly the resource that every athlete, family, and team needs. Team, we're back next Thursday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Until then, stay off the shortcuts, stay on the path, and remember why you started. This is Blueprint to Bluechip. We build the human being underneath the athlete, and we'll see you next week. Cam, Aaron, thank you so much. Team, we'll see you next week.